All right, so the session is now recording. Welcome everybody to this fantastic Lunch and Learn. Today is the 24th of February, and we're so honored to have Devin Rose here from eBridge Marketing Solutions to join us today to provide some great talk on some marketing and the topic today, as you can see on the screen, outsourcing marketing effectively. We have a couple of our team members from the marketing team, so it's hopefully going to be advantageous for them to hopefully learn something as well, and for everyone else, a number of affiliates on the call today as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Devin to kind of get started, and we'll let anyone else that comes in the room in one by one, and we'll go from there. And we'll leave. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat throughout the session today. Devin is happy to answer them as we're going along. There's Tanya, I'll let her in. And I'll monitor the chat and let Devin know of any questions that come in. Along with, we can do a more of a formal Q&A at the end and kind of share with some of the affiliates if they have any questions on that. So Devin, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today and giving us this wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and thanks everyone for joining us today. The topic of today's presentation is outsourcing marketing effectively, and there's kind of three things I'm hoping to leave you with today. Is some suggestions for marketing that can be outsourced cost effectively, where you can still get good value. Some suggestions for marketing that can be outsourced primarily only to people who you should trust that they have the quality skill set to handle it, and also just some general tips for dealing with outside marketers in terms of just working efficiently with them. So before we get into the presentation today, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and eBridge Marketing Solutions, who's my employer. So eBridge Marketing Solutions is a boutique marketing agency serving IT service providers. So a lot of managed service providers, data centers, web hosts, security companies, and kind of anyone in that space. Some of you might be familiar with my boss, Heartland Ross, who is involved with Tandem. We are located in Vancouver, Canada, established in 2001. So we've been doing this for 20 years now. I've been working with Heartland for 7 years, and we offer a full range of marketing services. So eBridge is really focusing in on B2B companies, but this presentation is broader in scope. I do have experience working B2C as well, and I have an entrepreneurial background myself. So if you have any questions about marketing, if it's B2C and it's, startup oriented, that's perfectly within the scope of what I can comment on. And so before we get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation today, I just wanted to discuss a few environmental factors that are key to the marketing landscape at the current time. And I promise I'm only going to use this word once, but COVID has had a big impact here in terms of maturing the market for freelancers and people working from home. Essentially people before who weren't situated to work from home probably have a nice little space, a desk space where they can do work quietly now through their day job. And so it just facilitates more people being available to freelance and to have a side gig as well. And this is just furthering what we've seen from globalization over the last decade or two, where the available labor pool is expanding. There are more choices, and marketing is a good example of this because it is a task that can be done remotely a lot of the time. And also the marketing mix is just becoming more complicated over time here. We're getting more decision makers involved. They're on more devices. They're in more offices. People are becoming more marketing savvy, and the old tactics that used to work don't work anymore. You have to be a little bit more nuanced. So it's becoming more complex, and the end result is that companies who are doing marketing do need to have different options of labor available, and there is a need for outsourcing because pretty much the days of a jack of all trades marketer are behind us. It's just it's too multifaceted to expect one person to have all the skill sets that are needed. So this brings us to the big question of today, and what I'll be aiming to answer is, how may startups most effectively outsource their marketing efforts? And I can draw on this question from a couple of perspectives. Being working for a marketing agency now, obviously I'm on that side of the fence, and can tell you a little bit about my experiences and what's worked best working with clients. And I've also worked with lots of marketing people who have, we've outsourced their efforts. So the first tip I want to talk about, and frankly, this is I would say the bulk of the presentation today, is to spend wisely by aligning cost and quality. And in this section, I'm hoping there might be some good questions that come up, and please feel free to ask them, because frankly, a lot of the things I may be talking about are debatable. I'm going to be making some sweeping generalizations about very large topics. So hey, that's great for debate. And if you disagree with me, I'd love to hear from you, because there's certainly different ways to go about this section. So let's talk about the sorts of factors that impact the cost of labor and the cost of marketing labor specifically. The big one obviously is cost of living, and I live in Vancouver, so I think we're the second most expensive city in the entire world to live in. And so the implication for me a lot of time, or anyone who's doing marketing in Vancouver or another major city, is if you want someone who has local knowledge of your market, the compensation is going to be commensurate to their cost of living. Obviously, there's many places in the world where the cost of living is lower, and if for those people, they might not have the same knowledge of the Vancouver market. So you kind of have to determine whether or not that localized knowledge is valuable enough for you. Or the other thing obviously too is skilled professionals tend to congregate towards cities, and cities have higher cost of living. So if you want quality help, generally you're going to pay for it. Another factor influencing it is domain expertise. So essentially how skillful the person is in their particular avenue of marketing. And I'll contrast this with industry experience, where you could have someone coming straight out of college who's really good with technical SEO, but they might not have the ability to apply it to your specific industry, knowing the nuances of the phrasing for the keywords that people are searching for, and so on. And so, generally speaking, the reason why I have this set up as a Venn diagram is, if you're only relying on one of these factors, if that's all you need for the person that you're getting the outsourcing from, you're going to be more likely to be able to go for a cost-effective solution. But if you're requiring like 2 or 3 of these things, it's going to be more costly in terms of labor. And frankly, you're going to want to be paying for that, the more costly labor, because that's the people who are actually going to be able to do the job. And so through this framework, I'll kind of analyze the tactics that are to come here. So let's start with website design and development. So when does it make sense to look towards cost savings when it comes to web design and development? And if you're a new startup, and I realize that there is a variety of different stages of growth in terms of the startups that are attending today, but if you're a new startup and you're still kind of at the proof of concept stage, that's where you want to be focused on cost savings with your website. Like a simple website, either through like WordPress or a drag and drop website builder, is going to suffice. Because proof of concept websites, you might need a simple e-commerce store, but generally speaking, the website's going to be pretty straightforward. Have the kind of the standard sections of a website that you expect: the about us, the homepage, some product or service pages, the card if it's necessary, contact us, all those things. We're not really reinventing the wheel at this stage, so it makes sense to focus on a little bit on cost savings rather than going for somebody who's more expensive. And it's a good one to outsource too, because for a basic website like that, you're not going to need a lot of industry specific knowledge or knowledge of the local environment. Another cost savings one to focus on is conventional marketing analytics. So I'm really talking about Google Analytics here. I'm sure most of you probably have Google Analytics on your websites already. If you don't, you should get it. It's free. And setting up Google Analytics out of the box is pretty straightforward. If you just want to get the basic tracking to see how many people are coming to your website, how long they're spending on your website, how many pages they're visiting, etc. That's pretty straightforward to set up. Any web developer has probably done it 100 times, and it doesn't matter where they live or if they have knowledge of your local market or anything, they're going to be able to do that. Um, Landing pages is also one that where you can get good value at low cost, because there are some really good tools. Being based in Vancouver, we like Unbounce for making landing pages because they're based in Vancouver as well, and it's pretty it's priced attractively. They have some really nice templates, and they make the entire process pretty easy. So you don't. It's a good cost saving measure to use a landing page tool like that. Of course, you can do really complicated landing pages as well, but I would say if the opportunity cost is probably worthwhile to invest the difference in spend in some other marketing tactic. Website maintenance. So this is really important nowadays with ransomware becoming more and more popular. And the biggest way that people get themselves in trouble with ransomware is not maintaining their website in terms of not having regular backups. So if you do have a breach, you can't restore your backup, but also not keeping your CMS and your plugins updated. So it should be done at least monthly, if not more regularly. And it's super important, but it also isn't super expensive. And it's like hundreds of dollars a month sort of a deal to have for a service like this. So it's definitely something that you can outsource effectively. And I would highly recommend it. If you're not doing it, you should get on it, because ransomware is no joke. And then so on the quality side of things, where does it make sense to spend a little bit more and to get that value? So if you have a full-fledged website, if you're a little bit more developed in terms of your stage of growth for your startup, you definitely want to hire someone who's a little bit more experienced. Your website is the main thrust of your brand's personality online. You don't want to entrust your brand personality to someone who doesn't know what they're doing when you're at that stage of growth. Also, if your industry has any specific integrations. So a couple examples come to mind. In the real estate industry, there are real estate listing APIs that need to be integrated into websites. That was going to require a little bit more industry specific knowledge. That's going to take it away from somebody who's like a really junior sort of a person, not going to be able to help you there. Likewise, in some of the industries we work in, like the data center industry and hosting, there are specific payment providers. Ubersmith comes to mind, where there's specific knowledge in terms of how you actually integrate that into your website, and you're going to want somebody with experience to do that. Custom marketing analytics. So while the conventional setup from Google Analytics is easy to get going out of the box, it can get pretty hairy if you are doing things like wanting custom attribution. Also, if you have subdomains, like maybe your store or something is on a subdomain that's different from your main website, any sort of wrenches like that quickly make the setup for marketing analytics way more complicated, and takes it from like kind of a junior task to something that you actually need someone who has really good industry experience to do it. MarTech implementation. So this is kind of similar to custom analytics in that, it's not hard to get MarTech set up on your website, but if the technology is really integrated into your website, like say something like a HubSpot, where it's not just a matter of putting down a piece of code. There's more. There's setup involved in it. Then you're going to want somebody who knows how to go through those steps. Conversion rate optimization. This is something that requires, in my opinion, you need to have not only the website and development skills, so the domain skill, but you need to have an understanding of the psychology of the target market. So if you are offering a service that is locally oriented, you do want to make sure you have somebody who understands the local market doing it, not someone who's like completely divorced, from your country or your area. And you also want to have someone who has the industry experience too. You kind of need both, because conversion rate optimization is essentially putting yourself in the position of a potential client or lead, and thinking through the checkout process from their perspective. So without that understanding of the target market, you just can't really do CRO very effectively. And what's the point of having a nice website, of course, if no one is going to it, which brings us to search marketing. And some of the there's kind of two aspects of search marketing. There's paid search and there is organic search. So on the organic search side, so SEO, There's some basic tactics that can be done by pretty much anyone who has the SEO chops. So, these are some really good ones to try to outsource more cost effectively. Speed optimization is a big one. This is important not only for Google, because that's a major factor that Google uses when ranking your site, but also for users. I mean, I'm sure everyone here can relate to having visited a website and waiting 5 seconds for it to load and then leaving the website. So if your website's not up to speed, then you're losing out big time. And there are some kind of low-hanging fruit measures that you can do to speed up a website. There's some plugins that you can implement to help reduce the size of images. There's caching plugins, and there's a variety of other ones as well. And any experienced web developer, regardless if they're in your market or if they're experienced in your industry, will be able to do that effectively. Link building. This is also a good one to try to outsource cost effectively because frankly, it is very time consuming. Link building is really the process of building out your backlinks, through the efforts of improving your offsite SEO. And the actual work involved here is reaching out to websites that are related to your business, or maybe they're local business associations, or just websites that generally publish information about your industry, and asking them to publish content for you to link back to your website. And the extent that they do that, it improves your backlink profile and your domain authority. So it's a worthwhile endeavor. It's less important than it used to be, though, and it is very time consuming because you get a lot of rejection, frankly, and just way more no's than yeses. So it makes sense to have someone who's a little bit less expensive in terms of the hourly rate to kind of facilitate that outreach and to get them the content that they need. Scripting meta tags. So there's every web page has a certain number of tags, or at least they're supposed to communicate with search engines effectively. So you want to make sure that your title tags, your meta tags, and also your social tags these days are optimized. They're it's kind of the main purpose of them, frankly, is kind of to help facilitate the relationship with Google and give Google what they need. So you can get away with using a cheaper provider for these. If you're really concerned about having nicely scripted ones that really represent your brand well, you might want to have somebody who has a little bit more industry experience take care of them. But if you're primarily looking at it from the lens of SEO, then you can usually outsource it overseas or something like that effectively. Local SEO. So, this is kind of counterintuitive, but local SEO doesn't really require a lot of local knowledge. It's mostly about going through the Google My Business listing and kind of giving Google everything, and other search engines too, but mainly Google, everything they need. So you show up on Google Maps, and so Google knows that you're relevant to people searching in your area. So it's just kind of a checklist of things that need to be done there, and it doesn't require a great deal of specified knowledge about your market or your industry. So Google Search Console, this should be set up for everyone as well. This is a tool that gives you great intelligence about your search traffic, and it also helps you facilitate any issues. Like it'll show you issues to do with your indexing, other issues to do with your site or how your site's being crawled, and offer solutions for them. So getting that set up is pretty standard these days too, and everyone should have it. And then so on the paid search side of things, for small scale campaigns, it can make sense to outsource them cheaply. There's some low hanging fruit that makes sense to do for most companies, like branded keywords, for instance. A campaign like that, a lot of providers are going to be able to help you suitably for. And the other thing with PPC campaigns is there's kind of two components to them, right? There's the ad spend, and then there's the management fee. And in a way, the management fee is kind of overhead for the ad spend. And so if your ad spend is low for a smaller campaign, it just doesn't make sense to spend a lot of money managing it, because you're just not going to be able to get the incremental benefit from that management to make it worthwhile. So for small scale campaigns for PPC, it's probably best just to keep the scope a little bit simpler. And it is, in that case, it is a good one to outsource cost effectively. On the other side of things, when should you be prioritizing the quality of service? Well, for SEO, It's really the advanced SEO. So fixing technical SEO errors on your website. This can be multifaceted in terms of what skill sets are needed. So, that one you do want to pay a little bit more for. And, it's also a type of thing where there can be a significant hindrance that's been caused by one issue that you might not be aware of. So the value that can be provided from having expertise in that area is significant. And similarly, website transitions. So this is when you're, redesigning your website, relaunching the website. From Google's perspective, the new website design is essentially a new website. They out of the box by default, they do not associate it with your previous website. So there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done ahead of time, during and after the transition, to ensure that none of the SEO credibility that you've gained is lost in the transition. It's especially if you have a fair amount of SEO like credibility already, if you're getting a lot of search traffic already. I can't emphasize enough how important this is, because the risk of a website transition is significant. You could lose it all and essentially be starting from zero, or you could plan it out, do it well, and keep the continuity for your website. So because of the risk there, even though this one doesn't really require industry specific knowledge, I think it is really important to get someone who's experienced in those website transitions. Keyword and competitive research. So, these are both kind of in the same bucket in terms of the strategic legwork for SEO. And these ones I do think it requires some industry specific knowledge. Like I'll give an example from, I used to work at Ritchie Brothers Auctioneers, which is an industrial equipment auctioneer. And one of the keywords that was important for them is crawler tractor. Well, crawler is a word that, it can refer to like babies, it can refer to so many bugs, it can refer to so many different things. So, not having that industry specific knowledge and being able to say like add on the negative keywords so we can actually get to the right type of crawler that we want. That's huge. You just don't want to be bidding on baby stuff when you're trying to sell industrial equipment, obviously. So having that industry specific knowledge is key. And similarly, keyword and competitive research often lays the groundwork for a content strategy. But the content strategy also looks at like what content you have on your website. For B2B companies, what sales collateral do you have? Are there any gaps in that? And to do that sort of an analysis, you do have to have the industry specific knowledge and the knowledge of the kind of what is missing essentially. And you're not going to get that from somebody who's junior or doesn't have that industry specific knowledge. Also, rich snippets. So these, you might not be familiar with the name, but you've almost for sure seen them. This is at the top of Google pages where there's like a little section that Google pulls out. So quite often I'll see this with recipes actually. I'll Google like how long to cook a chicken breast at 400 Fahrenheit or whatever. And like the first 3 steps are offered to me within the Google search results, right? That is a rich snippet. So it's really desirable to get those because you stick out so much more than anyone else who's in the Google search result. And it's tricky to get show up for them because they're very competitive. And also there's not like any hard, fast rule for how to show up there. Google will select you if you're generally doing SEO correctly, if you've checked all the boxes in general. So you kind of need somebody who has a holistic approach, who's got the experience to know kind of what's missing and what to add there in order to show up. And then on the paid search side of things, I mean, large scale PPC campaigns, you definitely want to be dealing with somebody who's got some expertise. I feel like it almost goes without saying. Obviously with pay-per-click, you can spend a lot of money very quickly, and it's the skill is really figuring out how to spend that effectively. Don't want to entrust that with somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. They definitely need to know your industry and probably your local geography as well. And picking up from search marketing, there's also digital advertising, so another way to send people to your website. And we can prioritize cost savings for small scale display campaigns. And actually to all 3 of these kind of bullets on the left-hand side are kind of related, so I'll address them at once. There's small scale display campaigns, small scale paid social media, and retargeting. So these are all using primarily banner ads, but also potentially some video ads. And you can facilitate these sorts of campaigns through the major networks like Google and Facebook. Um, Obviously not Google for social media, but regardless, similar justification to the PPC campaigns where the management fee is an overhead on these campaigns. So you don't want to be spending a lot of money on managing small campaigns. And yeah, especially for like something like retargeting too, it doesn't really require a lot of industry specific knowledge. Social media maybe a little bit more so, but I think for small scale campaigns, it probably doesn't make sense. And like also another thing to mention too is like display campaigns in general don't perform as well as they did 5 years ago. So, it made sense more 5 years ago to spend big bucks on management of that sort of thing because there was more potential ROI. These days, there's just not quite as much potential for those sorts of things. So, but having said that, when you should prioritize quality of service is if you're doing integrated marketing campaigns or advertising campaigns involving multiple networks where perhaps it's part of a marketing automation endeavor as well, where maybe you're serving different messages to people at different parts of the buying cycle. That's getting to a level of sophistication where you do need that industry specific knowledge. So that's when you want to spend a little bit more. And with sponsorships and events, that's anyone can go online and Google Canadian small business events, but it does require industry-specific knowledge and knowledge of geography of where you're working to know which ones are actually worthwhile. So that's something that you don't want to be showing up to events where you're completely wasting your time because the cost of going to these events is your time going to them more so than the time of setting them up and all that. So it makes sense to get somebody who's going to be respecting your time by sending you to the right sort of events and the right sort of sponsorships. Okay, and content creation. So this really ties into the SEO piece as well, because so much of SEO these days is copywriting and creating good content. So if you're on a B2C industry, I think you can get away with copywriting a little bit and using a little bit more of a cost-effective provider than you could if you're in the B2B space. B2C people aren't quite as picky, and it's just probably not worth as much. They're not quite searching as much as well, probably. So I think B2C you can get away with it a little bit more, just having someone who's maybe a little bit more junior doing the copywriting. And offsite SEO content. So this goes back to what I was talking about with the backlinks, about reaching out and asking people to publish content, to secure those backlinks. The content that you'd be publishing there is not really meant for human consumption. It is, but like it's more about trying to get the backlink. So given that, it makes sense to prioritize to kind of trying to get what's good enough versus what's like a perfect piece of prose. So you can get away with cost effective there. And then basic graphic design, I'm sure many of you have experience with websites like Elancer or Fiverr, and there's tons of really great graphic designers on there, and they don't really need industry-specific knowledge or knowledge of your location to do their job effectively. You can provide them with that necessary feedback, so it's a good one to outsource. And on the quality of service side, yeah, for B2B copywriting, totally different animal than B2C. B2B people are inundated all day with content and messaging and kind of just get in the habit of blocking it all out. And the way that, and that's coupled with the fact that so many companies these days are rightfully prioritizing content marketing as part of their inbound efforts, right? So, how do you stick out from the crowd? Really, the only way is by having better quality content, and that's how you're going to get people coming back and not marking you as junk and actually reading your newsletters, etc. So, it makes sense to spend a little bit more on the quality for B2B than it does for B2C. Similarly for very competitive topics, even on the B2C side of things, the more competitive the topic is in Google, the more that you want to be investing in some expertise to make sure that the writer is hitting the right keywords, that they know the right keywords where there's an opportunity to hit them. So yeah, the more competitive it is, the more you want to be prioritizing quality. Custom graphics. So, the greater the extent that you have to explain the vision of what graphics you want, the more it's going to make sense to work with somebody who's probably in your market where there's no language issues or anything like that. So yeah, to the degree to which it requires explanation, it means that you should be prioritizing probably a more costly provider. And thought leadership. I mean, this is probably the most obvious one, I would say, of the slides. I don't, for thought leadership, you need the whole, all three factors, the trifecta. You need somebody who's probably living in a city, who's expensive. You need somebody who has industry experience and somebody who, has a domain experience too. So, that one definitely needs to be prioritized in terms of and getting a, more expensive provider. Okay, on outbound marketing, and I'm using this term a little bit generally here for the purpose of this presentation, but generally speaking, in terms of just outreach to people, it doesn't really cost a lot to get somebody to queue up a bunch of emails. So if you're doing something like maybe you have 50 people you want to reach with a new offering that you put together, writing up that email once and then asking your marketing admin person who you're outsourcing to actually like set up the emails in your draft folder ready to send. It's a good use of time. And it's kind of a workaround before you're sophisticated enough to do marketing automation and have that fully fledged going. So that's one way to do it. They can send out your MailChimp email blast and all that too. Just administering the email is a good thing to do. Organic social media for B2B. So this contrasts with the content creation, where for content creation, we prioritize more expensive for B2B and less expensive for B2C. For social media, it's the opposite. For B2B, I don't generally recommend placing a great deal of priority on social media because it doesn't really generate a lot of leads these days. A little bit of an exception made for LinkedIn, where you should have a presence and everything, but for Facebook, they've been so restrictive with their algorithms over the years that even if you're publishing really good content, it's not going to get in front of a lot of eyeballs. So it's kind of makes more sense just to kind of be in maintenance mode if you're a B2B company. On the flip side, though, if you're B2C, I mean, obviously social media is still huge. It's gotten more difficult over the years as well, with like cutting down on, say, like affiliate marketers and the was it Kylie Jenner can't just say that she's sponsoring this product anymore without having the disclaimer in her Instagram, those sorts of things, right? So it's more sophisticated than it is for B2B with social media, and you want somebody who's doing more than just the maintenance mode, someone who actually has knowledge of your specific industry. And for marketing automation is the top bullet there. Marketing automation is very multifaceted in terms of what you need to know to get it all set up. So this is the process of really, being using artificial intelligence and automation to be intelligent about the sales process. So you kind of know when people are opening your emails, when people are visiting your website, when they're interacting with your marketing in general. You measure that as best you can. You incorporate that with feedback from your sales team, and that all kind of goes into like lead scoring. And then so kind of based on the lead scoring where they are in that process of the sales process, how well qualified they are. And based on that, you can serve them the type of information that they probably want given where they are in the sales process. So that is a very, very integrated marketing strategy that, HubSpot is probably the biggest provider and the one that we've seen the most often who facilitates that process. And yeah, I've seen a lot of people sign up for HubSpot and they get overwhelmed and it sits there. And frankly, these tools are expensive. So you want to make sure that you have someone who knows how to use it. Otherwise, you're just going to be paying like a few $1,000s a month for something that's sitting there doing nothing for you. And you may as well have just done the administrative email outreach process instead. And traditional media. So, I think the justification for this one being the quality of service too is that you can blow through a lot of money really quickly doing traditional media. And it does require that knowledge of the specific local market. So like what radio stations make sense to advertise on. I mean, it certainly helps to have someone who lives in that local market to have a good feel for that sort of thing. And then my uncategorized category here, where I couldn't fit anything else in. So other marketing. under prioritized cost savings, I have brand development question mark, and I debated this one back and forth, which is why I put the question mark. And I decided to put it on the left side here under the prioritized cost savings column because of the audience today being startups. I have seen a lot of startups where the founder gets too into the brand development too early in the company at the expense of the more important things that they should be doing. And why I think it's maybe gets too much emphasis is because you can always rebrand later anyway. It's not like you're like most companies do. And so, it's not like you have to get it correct out of the gate anyway. Like for most startups, it just needs to be good enough, and then you can grow it iteratively, improve it, tweak it over time. And if you do want to do a full-on rebranding later on when the company is larger, it's no big deal. It's not like you're losing out or anything. So I don't really think it makes sense to spend a lot of money on brand development early on in a startup's life cycle. But having said that, I'd go back to what I said about, your website and is a big part of your brand, and you want to, prioritize kind of the personality that you're putting out there. So I don't want to diminish the importance of branding, but just to say that it's not static. And because it's not static, I don't think it makes sense to invest a ton in it early on in the startup's life cycle. And then some kind of miscellaneous things where it's the quality of service should be prioritized. Channel marketing. So this is really a B2B tactic of similar to affiliate marketing, where you're going to center or persons of influence, centers of influence, and getting them to market your products to their audience, essentially. So in the case of a lot of B2B products, the channel is MSPs or ISVs, or kind of just generally kind of resellers / service providers. So it definitely requires a lot of industry specific knowledge, because not only do you need to have an understanding of the channel, so the MSP, but you also have to have an understanding of their customers. So like psychology wise, it's pretty advanced. And if you're doing channel marketing, like, frankly, they don't teach you about it in high school, or sorry, in university and marketing classes or anything. So you need somebody who has that real life experience, because that's only the only way you really learn how to do channel marketing. And strategic planning, I think that's pretty self-explanatory there, where you don't want to be trusting the future of your business to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. You want somebody who really knows your industry. Lead generation, the reason why I put this into the quality of service versus cost savings, because there are lead generation options that are affordable, and there are ones that are more expensive. But the ones that are affordable, like, you kind of get what you pay for to a large degree, unless you're like really get lucky in terms of finding a solution that is both cost effective and gives you good quality leads. But if you're getting bad quality leads, then it's a waste of time. It's kind of like the conferences and events, right, where there's a significant cost to actually following up on the leads and all that. So it just doesn't make sense to be filling your pipeline with poor quality leads. So that was everything in terms of aligning the cost and the quality. And so I do have a few more tips just generally for working with outside marketers as well. So let's talk about budgets. And I know this is kind of a contentious one a lot of times, but the reality is that from a marketer's perspective, what the budget is one of the biggest factors, if not like the biggest factor in determining what their appropriate recommendations are. And so I think when you're speaking to a marketer, it goes a long way to be prepared with an idea of what your budget is, and to be forthright with it. So, and like a lot of people might not know like specifically what your budget is, or might not have like an exact number in mind, in which case providing a range or an approximation is fine. But err on the side of conservatism and not optimism, because us marketers, we can't help ourselves. We will do the optimistic portion of your budget. You can count on that, right? So like you kind of have to help us help ourselves by being a little bit cautious and in terms of your budget estimation, so it's more realistic. And also don't be forward looking when stating your budget. So kind of a stereotypical answer that I get sometimes when I ask about budgets is, well, if we get ROI, then the budget is infinite. It doesn't help me for planning purposes, though. Like it's really about what the budget is today, because that helps me formulate what I can actually reasonably recommend to you. or to my clients. And as I've illustrated on the previous slides, there are different options for the same use cases. So, like if the budget was $10,000 a month, let's talk marketing automation. If the budget's $2,500 a month, let's talk manual email outreach. That sort of thing. That's just an example off the top of my head, but it really does play into it. And being forthright too. I mean, like I can't speak for all marketers, but when I've spoken to clients who I couldn't work with because maybe they didn't have a budget that we could work with, I was happy to recommend them to someone who I knew who would be able to help them better. So there's really no downside to being forthright, and it's something I see a lot where people are kind of trying to mask their budget. And I think their reasoning being is they don't want to constrain the marketer into like limiting what options they're going to recommend. They kind of want the best recommendations possible. But what they don't realize is the best recommendations are different depending on the budget. So in terms of expectations as well, I mean, this is just good general business practices, obviously, in terms of controlling expectations, and it's no different with a marketer. And just a few common sense ways to do this is to firm up the KPIs that matter to you. These do vary industry to industry. And not just focus on ROI, because ROI is quite difficult to calculate these days, especially for like B2B. It's a little bit easier for B2C. But you should be looking at ROI in conjunction with other marketing metrics, because we're not going to be able to measure ROI perfectly. There's just too many restrictions these days on doing so. So, you have to take it into consideration with other factors as well. And firming those up at the beginning of an engagement with a marketing agency is really important. Gets you on the same page. I would insist on monthly reporting for any marketer you're working with, and make sure they're reporting on those KPIs. Kind of self-explanatory, but just helps to keep them accountable, helps to keep you in the loop and see what's in terms of what's going on in the progress in terms of results. And setting aggressive deadlines while anticipating delays. So I think it's almost like a meme how, like, say, website projects are always delayed. As a marketer, I definitely try my best to steer it towards getting them on time. But the reality is that these projects do involve feedback quite often from many people that leads to delays. So I think when you're working with marketers, you should just try to be a little bit aggressive with your deadlines to get them to speed up the process a little bit. And yeah, that's what I would do. And in terms of communication, marketers really need specific communication. Like so I wrote here screenshots, quotes, and bullet points. If you're describing something visual that you don't like or you want changed, take a screenshot of it and like highlight exactly what you don't like about it and be as specific as you can. Likewise, if there's something in some copywriting that you don't like or you want changed, quote it. Generalized comments are really hard to deal with as a marketer sometimes, and it just inevitably ends up in a bunch of back and forth and kind of wasted time for both parties. So just being as specific as possible is really helpful, almost to the point of being patronizing, to be honest. Like, and especially if you're working with an overseas marketer where there might be language issues, like be borderline patronizing, because it's not patronizing, it's actually just good communication. Having a single main point of contact for both parties is also crucial. As I mentioned, tends to be delays in marketing projects when many people are providing feedback. So like the stereotypical example is maybe the marketer at the company signs off on something, and then 2 weeks later the owner doesn't like it. It's so inefficient. So you really need to have one point of contact for the marketing agency, one point of contact for the client, and then the client needs to be responsible for collating all the feedback from their team. And just regular voice communication. So similarly to the reporting, having that frequent cadence, just little things come out of phone calls, low priorities that the marketer might not have known about, and it's important to have that constant communication. And that really ends the presentation. I've gone over the marketing tactics where you can prioritize the quality, and then some marketing tactics where it can make sense to get good value out of lower cost providers. And so thank you very much for joining the call today and for listening. And at this point, it'd be great to take some questions.
Thank you so much, Devin. That was fantastic. We'll open up the floor to any Q&A right now. If you'd like, you can unmute yourself to ask questions.
Hi, Devin. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'd love to ask a question that many people might have. Um, if if you're working in a startup and what would you prioritize in terms of a marketing spend, and what projects would you kind of, if you were step laddering it from, most startups will start with, where do I start with $1,500 a month, or even $500 a month? What does that look like? So that you can develop the relationship into a bigger, until you figure out what is actually needed.
Good question. So it's going to vary depending on industry and everything. So I'll make some wide sweeping statements that'll not be applicable for everybody. But I think once you have a website that's set up that's good enough, social media marketing is probably the way to go for a lot of this. The nice thing about social media is there's the kind of demand generation part of it, which you can do from one platform, but there's also the retargeting that you can layer on. And the retargeting is nice because it allows you to engage with people who've already visited your website and left the website without completing a purchase. So it's not really like marketing automation or account-based marketing where it's more about, those are more about developing the relationship and kind of engaging with people over time. But this still allows you to engage with them in kind of I guess, a little bit more of an informal way. Um, and besides that, I would also just say like the low cost things like email marketing is still huge, right? Especially for B2B, but also for B2C. So you want to be making sure that you have a form on your website to collect people's email addresses, and that you are following up and sending email blasts and those sorts of things. And again, it all plays in with the social media too, right? Because if you're driving people to your site and you get them to sign up through email, that's just another way to re-engage with them. So yeah, I mean, just generally speaking, I would say probably makes sense to make sure you have a good enough website, um, a little bit in the way of like a process around email marketing and reaching out to people that way. And then to layer on like probably one ad network, probably Facebook, maybe Google, depending on your industry, or maybe LinkedIn too. To be honest, you could consider all three. It's going to depend, but I would imagine for a lot, it would be Facebook.
Hey, Devin, it's Anders Cruz here. In a prior incarnation, we were using some geo-specific or geo-fence delivery of some online advertising. That wasn't very successful, but I'd be interested to hear your take on if it has been effective, and when to use it and when not to.
Yeah, so I mean, we talked about the Facebook in particular, and one of the challenges Facebook has had is they have not been very good at their geo-specific targeting traditionally. Um, it's kind of frustrating too because I actually just saw news last week that they knew about this issue and they chose not to fix it. So I hear you. It is a challenge. There's no real easy workaround with it because it does kind of lie in the hands of the ad networks. So, I mean, like there are some ways you can maybe mitigate it by maybe instead of doing just the geo targeting, maybe you also layer on targeting for local business groups, something like that, right? You double up on it. That would be one way to do it. But yeah, I definitely hear you. The geo targeting is not great. It's better for Google, but for Facebook, it's pretty subpar.
Okay. Yeah, our experience was that, we were trying to use it to be cost effective to target the ads. And what happened was we just got virtually no traffic through it. But so I like your idea about don't use or, not and as a modifier, right? So business group or in the area, not and in the area, because otherwise you're not going to get any hits at all.
Yeah. I would
Thanks.
agree.
Fantastic presentation. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Hi, Devin. It's David here. I do have one question. In terms of marketing B2B, well, like for consultants like yourself, like e-blasts and things like that, would you say that that's effective? Considering a lot of the corporations just get a ton of email blasts all the time, and you're just kind of just another email that they're going to delete without maybe opening it for maybe 5 seconds. Like how how effective is that, even relative to just simply putting out good content?
It's more effective than you would imagine. I'm consistently surprised by it. People still open email, and it obviously the tone that you have in the email is important too. But if you go for like a conversational tone that's kind of short and to the point, and kind of just gets to what you actually want, that tends to be what performs the best. I mean, still the majority of your emails obviously aren't going to be opened. You are going to have people who just archive you every single time. But it's a bit of a numbers game too, right? And the more that you grow your database, the more leads you're going to have. We do a fair amount of email marketing ourselves, and it's definitely effective for us, and we recommend it for our clients. There's also there's email marketing to your own clients, right? Where you could do upselling and that sort of thing, or just let them know what you're up to. But there's also lead generation through outbound email marketing, which again is surprisingly effective still.
Mm-hmm.
I know though where there's a lot of Canadians on the call today, and in Canada, unfortunately, we do have more anti-spam laws than our friends in the United States. So American companies can it's a little bit of the Wild West down there. You can just do whatever you want. But in Canada, we have the anti-spam laws. So you need to be a little bit careful in that regard and not do, frankly, you just want to keep your volumes low is really at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then, there's how you get yourself in trouble too is if you start publishing bad quality content and people start marking you as junk mail and all that, the email service provider will know that, and then they'll start restricting your ability to do email blasts. So it's quality first, if you're doing it to your existing customers. And I think if you're doing outbound marketing, it's outbound lead generation, it just being kind of more informal but really to the point is kind of what works the best.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think Hillary mentioned a question in the chat here. What's the best value you can offer to drive traffic to a marketing list?
Best value.
Color commentary to that, Devin. I know the number one rule is like drive people to a list. Your list is the one thing that you really own. My question is, what's the best hook to get people to that list?
Well, I'll give you a generic answer. Sorry, but adding value is the best thing to do. So not annoying them. In the case of B2B, can you educate them about maybe is there like we work for a lot of MSPs, so I'll use this as an example, or maybe doing an MSP sending out like a security checklist is a good idea. Or I should say, like, when you're sending them, they're sending them to the list, but then there's keeping them, right? So sending them to the list, the call to action should probably be around find out the latest, or keep up to date, or whatever it is. Try to tease them about them missing out on something that would add value. And then of course you got to walk the walk and talk the talk, so you want to actually deliver that value afterwards and not be annoying, essentially. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
And then Tanya mentioned here in the chat, if you could share what your recommended e-newsletter platform and CRM would be.
We like HubSpot. There are downsides to HubSpot too. So the upside to HubSpot is for marketers, it's really easy to use for the most part. The tool itself is excellent. It's well set up, it's simple, it makes sense, relatively simple. It's a complicated process, so it isn't super simple, but it's as simple as they can make it. The downsides to HubSpot though is if you have a lot of other like technology that you need to implement to your site, like maybe you have a legacy CRM or something, HubSpot does not play well with others. They really want you to sign up for them and them alone. If you're interested in something that's a little bit more customizable, that does play well with others, another one we like is called SharpSpring. Similar to HubSpot, pretty much the same functionality, just not quite as well known. They're lower cost too. So that's a really good one. Another thing about HubSpot is they have so many marketing materials that it's almost overwhelming if you don't know where to look, to the point where they almost give conflicting information in their various help articles. So you kind of, if it can be a little bit difficult getting up and going with HubSpot. So if you're not in a position to do that learning, then it might not be the good solution for you. There's also a lot of industry-specific CRMs and email marketing platforms. In our kind of world of B2B tech companies, there's one called Mind Matrix, which gives you everything you need to go, including the CRM and the email templates and everything. I'm not as familiar with other industries, but there probably is one for your specific industry as well.
Perfect. And Hillary also mentioned in the chat, what about ActiveCampaign? This is the one I've consistently heard is great.
Honestly, I'm not familiar with ActiveCampaign, so I can't answer that one.
No worries. Thank you. Perfect. Great. And any other questions in the chat or anyone in the room? Perfect. Well, if no other questions, Devin, that was absolutely incredible. Such great value. We thank you so much again for spending the past hour with us today and providing that value. We'll definitely put the recording in the Tandem Slack channel for those that want to watch it again or for those that missed it. And I'll make sure to put your contact information there as well for anybody that also wants to reach out. So thank you again, everyone, for jumping on board. And Devin Rose, thank you so much again for being part of.
I have one final question, Maher. Devin,
yes.
What portion of all of this do you do?
Well, we're B2B, and we are a full service agency. So, you know, pretty much all of it, except the only thing that we really don't do is much in the public relations, or we're not really a brand development shop. But besides that, we handle everything pretty much. So.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate your attention and time today, and glad it was a good presentation. Thank you.